The trunk slammed shut above me, and for a moment, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing, mixed with the muffled sounds of their laughter outside. Tiffany's high-pitched giggle, Mark's smug whistle, and then Karen's voice, dripping with false sweetness as it filtered through the metal. "Hurry up now, princess. The pool's waiting for you." That's when I knew. I wasn't just left behind. I was thrown away. My name is Leah, and I'm 19 years old. This is the story of how I spent 5 days locked in the trunk of a car in the Arizona desert, and how I made sure my family would never forget what they did to me. The heat hit me first. Not the comfortable warmth of a summer day, but the suffocating, relentless heat of the Sonoran Desert in July. The Dusty Cactus Motor Lodge sat on the outskirts of Page, Arizona, a rundown motel that looked like it had been baking under the sun since the 1960 seconds. The temperature gauge on the dashboard had read 105 degrees Fahrenheit when we pulled in, and that was outside. Inside the trunk, it felt like being slowly roasted alive. The smell was the second thing. Old rubber, gasoline fumes, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something stale and forgotten, like everything else they thought I was. I should probably start at the beginning. Not the beginning of this trip, but the beginning of when I realized that to my family, I had never been a daughter or a sister. I was a convenience, a tool. Something to be used when needed and discarded when I became inconvenient. My stepfather Mark had married my mother Karen when I was 7 years old. I barely remembered my biological father, just vague impressions of a man who smelled like coffee and used to read me bedtime stories. He died in a car accident when I was 5, and Karen remarried quickly. Too quickly, I realize now. She needed someone to take care of us, and Mark needed a wife who wouldn't ask too many questions about where he spent his evenings or why his bank statements never quite added up. Tiffany was Mark's daughter from his first marriage. She was 2 years younger than me, and from the moment Mark moved into our house, it was clear that she was the golden child, the princess, the one who deserved everything while I was expected to be grateful for scraps. I told myself for years that it would get better. That if I just tried harder, was kinder, more helpful, more invisible when they needed me to be, they would eventually see my worth. I was wrong. The trip to Arizona was supposed to be Tiffany's pre-college celebration. She had gotten into Arizona State University, though I suspected it had more to do with Mark's generous donation to their alumni fund than her mediocre grades. Karen had been planning this trip for months, talking endlessly about all the places they would visit, the Grand Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, Lake Powell, and of course, plenty of time by the hotel pool for Tiffany to work on her tan. I wasn't supposed to come. I had overheard them discussing it one night when they thought I was asleep. "Do we really have to bring her?" Tiffany had whined. "It's supposed to be my trip." "I know, sweetheart," Karen had replied, her voice soothing in a way it never was when she spoke to me. "But what will people think if we leave her behind? Besides, she's 19 now, old enough to be useful." Useful. That word again. Mark had grunted his agreement. "She can carry bags, watch our stuff at the beach, keep the car clean, consider her free labor." That's all I had ever been to them. Free labor. The morning we left, I had one small backpack with a change of clothes, my phone charger, and the $37 I had managed to save from the part-time job I worked at the local grocery store. Karen took most of my paycheck each month for room and board, leaving me with barely enough to buy necessities. Tiffany, meanwhile, had 3 large suitcases, a carry-on, and a makeup case that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. We were only 2 hours into the drive when it started. I had asked if we could stop at a gas station. The car's air conditioning was broken in the back seat where I sat, and the Arizona heat was already becoming unbearable. I just wanted to buy a bottle of water. Karen had turned around from the passenger seat, her face twisted in annoyance. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Leah. Every single dollar is for Tiffany's trip before she goes to college. You should be grateful you're even allowed to come along." I had swallowed my protest, my throat dry and aching. Mark had laughed, that cruel bark of a laugh I had learned to hate over the years. He reached under his seat and pulled out a warm, half-empty plastic bottle of water, probably left there for weeks. "Drink this and shut up. You should be happy you're not walking." Tiffany hadn't even looked up from her phone. She was taking selfies, practicing her pout for Instagram. When she finally glanced at me, her lip curled in disgust. "Trash belongs in the garbage. The trunk is still too good for you." I took the bottle. The water tasted like plastic and defeat. When we finally arrived at the Dusty Cactus Motor Lodge, I thought things might improve. At least we would be out of the car. I could find a place to sit in the shade. Maybe fill up my water bottle from a sink somewhere. I was wrong about that too. Mark pulled into the parking lot and turned to look at me. His eyes were hard, calculating. "Get in the trunk." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What?" "You heard me. Get in the trunk. I don't want the other guests seeing what a pathetic mess you are. It'll reflect badly on us." "But I can just wait by the car, or—" He didn't let me finish. He got out, walked around to my door, and yanked it open with such force that the hinges squeaked. His hand grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to leave bruises. He dragged me out of the back seat and pushed me toward the rear of the car. It wasn't just a command. It was a physical humiliation, a reminder that I had no power, no voice, no rights in this family. "Get in," he repeated, popping the trunk open. I looked at Karen, hoping for some intervention, some shred of maternal instinct that might make her say this was too far. She was reapplying her lipstick in the visor mirror. She didn't even look at me. Tiffany was smiling. I climbed into the trunk. What else could I do? I had no money, no car, no way to get home from the middle of the Arizona desert. I told myself it would just be for a few minutes while they checked in. Then they would let me out and I could find somewhere to sit while they enjoyed their vacation. The trunk slammed shut, and there I stayed. The first night was the worst. The heat didn't dissipate when the sun went down. The metal of the car had absorbed so much heat during the day that the trunk felt like an oven. I could barely breathe. Every breath felt like I was inhaling fire. I was dizzy, nauseous, and so thirsty I thought I might die. I tried knocking on the trunk, gently at first, then more desperately. I could hear them inside the motel room, the TV blaring, their voices casual and relaxed. I heard Tiffany's window slide open. "Shut up, you little rat! I'm trying to watch a movie!" The window slammed closed. I don't remember much of that first night. I think I passed out at some point, my body finally giving in to the heat exhaustion. When I woke up, it was dawn, and the cool morning air was seeping through the cracks in the trunk. It was the most relief I had felt in hours, and I knew it wouldn't last long. Mark opened the trunk around 8 in the morning. I blinked up at him, my vision blurry, my lips cracked and bleeding. "Get out, quietly. Don't make a scene." I climbed out on shaking legs. My body ached everywhere. My head was pounding. He shoved me toward the motel room. "Clean yourself up. You look disgusting." Inside, Karen and Tiffany were getting ready for breakfast. Karen barely glanced at me as she brushed past, carrying her designer purse. "We're going to the diner down the road. You'll stay here." But I haven't eaten since. "There's bread in the bag. Eat that." She pointed to a small paper bag on the dresser. Inside was half a slice of dry toast, hard as a rock. It was the leftover from someone's breakfast, probably scraped off a plate. They left. I ate the toast because I had no choice. It tasted like cardboard and humiliation. That became the pattern. They would let me out in the early morning when the motel was quiet, allow me to use the bathroom, maybe give me their leftover scraps. Then they would go off for the day to enjoy their vacation, hiking to scenic overlooks, swimming in natural pools, eating at nice restaurants, and I would either sit outside on the curb in the blistering heat or, more often, be locked back in the trunk. "We can't have you wandering around making us look bad," Karen had said, as if that explained everything. The second day, they went to a local diner for breakfast. I was allowed to come this time, though I wasn't allowed inside. I sat on the curb outside, watching families and couples go in and out, smiling, laughing, living their normal lives. I must have looked like a homeless kid. Maybe I was. When they came out, Karen tossed me a napkin wrapped around a piece of dry bacon. "Here, eat up. We're going to Horseshoe Bend today. You'll be staying at the motel." Tiffany had a large soda in her hand, the cup sweating with condensation in the heat. As she walked past me, she accidentally tipped it, dumping the entire sticky, sugary mess all over my lap and the front of my only shirt. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Sorry about that. I guess the ants will really like you now." She laughed. Mark chuckled. Karen just shook her head as if Tiffany had done something adorably clumsy rather than deliberately cruel. They left me there, on the curb, covered in sticky soda, in 105-degree heat. Within minutes, the ants came, then the flies. The sugar in the soda had crystallized on my skin, attracting every insect in the area. I couldn't go back to the motel room because they had locked it. I couldn't wash it off because there was no water. I sat there for 6 hours, covered in insects, baking in the sun, wearing a shirt that was now stiff with dried soda. By the time they came back, I had stopped crying. I had stopped feeling much of anything except a cold, growing rage that sat like a stone in my chest. That night, they let me shower. It was the first kindness they had shown me in days, though it wasn't really kindness. Karen had complained that I smelled bad and it was embarrassing. After my shower, I lay in the trunk again. They had decided it was easier to keep me there overnight rather than risk me making noise in the motel room. I could hear them through the thin walls, their voices floating out through the window they had left cracked open for fresh air. "She's 19 and still at that cheap community college," Mark was saying. "What a waste." "I know," Karen replied. Her voice was casual, as if they were discussing the weather. "But at least she'll be useful later. When Tiffany has kids, Leah can babysit. Help with housework. Free labor is always convenient." Free labor. There it was again. A live-in servant, Mark said with a laugh. Not a bad investment after all. They weren't talking about a daughter. They weren't even talking about a person. They were talking about property, about a thing they owned that could be used and discarded at will. Something broke inside me that night. Or maybe something finally crystallized. I had spent 12 years trying to earn their love, their respect, even just basic human decency. I had been patient. I had been kind. I had been everything they told me I needed to be. And it had never mattered. It would never matter. Because to them, I wasn't a person. I was a tool. But tools can be turned into weapons. I stopped crying that night. I stopped hoping. Instead, I started watching, listening, planning. Mark was careless. I had noticed it before, but now I paid attention to every detail. Every night when they returned to the motel, he would toss his wallet and car keys onto the small table by the window. The window that was always left slightly open because the motel's air conditioning barely worked. Karen kept her purse on the chair next to the door. Tiffany left her belongings scattered everywhere, including her small clutch wallet that she took to dinners. I noticed other things too. Mark had 2 credit cards he used regularly. One was clearly personal, with his name embossed in silver letters. The other had a small corporate logo in the corner. He used that one to pay for most of the trip. Gas, meals, the motel room, everything. I had heard him on the phone a few times, talking loudly about work, making it clear to anyone listening that he was an important person at some company. He liked to brag about his position, his authority, his access to company resources. He was using company money for a personal family vacation. That was fraud. That was embezzlement. And I was going to make sure someone found out. The opportunity came on the 5th night. They had decided to go to a nicer restaurant in town, one that served alcohol. They came back late, stumbling and laughing, clearly drunk. Tiffany could barely walk straight. Karen was leaning heavily on Mark, giggling like a teenager. In her drunken state, Tiffany dropped her clutch wallet on the ground near the car. Mark fumbled with the car keys, dropping them on the roof of the car before staggering toward the motel room with Karen and Tiffany. I waited in the trunk, my heart pounding. I waited until I heard their door close, until the lights in their room went out, until the only sound was Mark's loud snoring filtering through the window. Then I pushed the emergency trunk release lever. Most people don't know about it, but I had spent enough time in that trunk to find it. The trunk popped open silently, and I climbed out into the cool desert night. The stars were incredible. I had never seen so many stars. For just a moment, I let myself feel the beauty of it, the vastness of the universe, the reminder that there was a whole world beyond this parking lot, beyond these people who had tried to make me small. Then I got to work. First, Tiffany's wallet. It was lying on the ground, easy to retrieve. Inside was her driver's license, a debit card, and about $60 in cash. I took the cash. I left the cards and ID. Next, the car keys. I had to stand on my toes to reach them on the roof of the car, but I managed. I unlocked the car as quietly as possible and retrieved Mark's wallet from the glove compartment where he had tossed it earlier. His wallet was much more interesting. His driver's license, 2 credit cards, about $200 in cash, and several receipts. I looked through the receipts carefully. Dinner at an upscale steakhouse, charged to the corporate card. Gas for the entire trip, corporate card. The motel room, corporate card. Everything was being charged to his company, and this was clearly a personal vacation. I took photos of everything with my phone, every receipt, both sides of both credit cards, his driver's license. Then I carefully took the cash from both wallets and put the wallets back exactly where I found them. I wanted them to think they had simply lost their money while drunk, not that someone had taken it. $260. It was more money than I had seen in months, but I wasn't done. There was a payphone at the gas station 2 blocks away. I had seen it when they had driven past earlier. I walked there through the dark, empty streets of Page, Arizona, feeling more alive than I had in years. The first call I made was to the motel front desk. I disguised my voice, making it higher, panicked. I'm in room 106, and I'm hearing a terrible fight in room 104. People are shouting and I hear things breaking. I think someone might get hurt. The night clerk sounded alarmed. I'll send someone to check right away. Good. The second call was trickier. I used the information from Mark's corporate credit card to find his company's website on my phone. Every major company has an ethics hotline, a number for reporting fraud, misconduct, or illegal activity. Mark's company was no different. I called the hotline. A recorded message asked me to leave detailed information about the complaint. I kept my voice calm and factual. I'm calling to report potential corporate fraud. An employee named Mark Robertson is currently staying at the Dusty Cactus Motor Lodge, room 104, in Page, Arizona. He's been using a corporate credit card ending in 4,782 to fund what appears to be a personal family vacation. I have reason to believe he's been doing this for some time. The charges include multiple restaurant meals, gas, lodging, and entertainment, none of which appear to be business-related. You should also know that during this trip, he has been engaging in what I would consider child endangerment. There may be legal issues beyond just financial fraud. I think someone should look into this immediately. I left the hotline number and Mark's employee information that I had found on one of his business cards in his wallet. Then I made one more call, this one to the card company itself. I reported the corporate card as potentially stolen and requested that it be frozen pending an investigation. By the time I was done, it was nearly 3 in the morning. I walked back to the motel, but I didn't go back to the trunk. Instead, I took my cash and walked to the diner across the street. It was one of those 24-hour places that catered to truckers and travelers. I went inside, sat in a booth by the window, and waited. At 6 in the morning, I ordered breakfast. Not just any breakfast, the biggest breakfast on the menu. Eggs, bacon, sausage, hash browns, pancakes, toast, orange juice, and coffee. When the waitress brought it out, I ate slowly, savoring every single bite. It was the first real meal I had eaten in days, and it tasted like freedom. From my seat by the window, I had a perfect view of the motel parking lot. At 7:30, the motel manager knocked on the door of room 104. I watched as Mark opened it, his hair disheveled, clearly hungover. The manager was talking animatedly, gesturing, clearly upset about something. Probably the noise complaint. At 8 o'clock, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot. 2 officers got out. They walked over to where the manager and Mark were still arguing. Karen had come out now, wrapped in a robe, her face still puffy from sleep. Tiffany appeared in the doorway, looking confused and annoyed. I watched as one of the officers walked around the car. He noticed the trunk was slightly open. I had left it that way deliberately, just a crack, enough that someone would notice if they looked. The officer opened the trunk fully and shined his flashlight inside. Even from across the street, I could see his expression change. He called his partner over. They both looked into the trunk, then looked at Mark. Their body language shifted. This was no longer a routine noise complaint. The empty water bottles I had left there, the piece of dried toast. My shirt, still stiff with dried soda, folded in the corner. The way the space was clearly too small for a person to be comfortable, yet obviously had been used for exactly that purpose. I watched as Karen started gesticulating wildly. Mark was talking fast, his hands moving in broad gestures that I recognized. He was trying to charm his way out of it, trying to make it seem like a misunderstanding. The officers weren't buying it. One of them pulled out handcuffs. I took a sip of my orange juice and smiled. Karen tried to pay for the motel room with her credit card. I watched the front desk clerk shake his head. She tried Mark's card. Same result. The corporate card had been frozen, and apparently their personal cards were maxed out. She was starting to panic now, raising her voice, demanding to speak to a manager. Tiffany was crying. Real tears, not the fake ones she used to get her way. She was scrolling frantically through her phone, probably trying to call someone, anyone who could help them. Mark's phone kept ringing. Even from across the street, I could hear it. That distinctive ringtone he used for work calls. His company was calling. Again and again. Everything was falling apart for them, and I was eating the best pancakes of my life. The police spent over an hour with them. They searched the car, they took photos of the trunk, they interviewed Karen and Tiffany separately. I could see both women growing more distressed as time went on. Eventually, the police left, but not before writing down a lot of information and making it very clear that this wasn't over. I would learn later, through a Google search on my phone, that they had opened an investigation into potential child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment. The motel manager was refusing to let them stay another night without payment. Karen couldn't produce a working credit card. They were going to have to leave. I watched them pack up their belongings in a frenzy. Tiffany was still crying. Karen was yelling at Mark. Mark was yelling at both of them. For the first time in my entire life, they were the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Other motel guests were watching them, whispering to each other, judging them. They looked pathetic, small, powerless. They looked exactly how they had always made me feel. I finished my breakfast, left a generous tip for the waitress. She had been kind to me, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything, and walked out of the diner. I didn't look back at them. I didn't need to. I had seen everything I needed to see. I walked to the bus station 3 blocks away. With the cash I had taken, I had enough for a ticket to Phoenix. From Phoenix, I could figure out my next move. I had my phone. I had some money. I had my identification. And for the first time in my life, I had something else too. I had my freedom. The bus to Phoenix left at 10 in the morning. I sat by the window, watching the Arizona desert roll past. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. It demanded respect. It didn't apologize for being difficult. It simply was what it was, and if you couldn't handle it, that was your problem, not the desert's. I liked that. I could learn from that. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. I had several missed calls from her too, but I hadn't answered. The text read, "Where are you? We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Come back right now." I blocked the number. Another text came through, this time from Tiffany. "You bitch. You did this. I know you did. You're going to pay for this." I blocked her number too. Then one more, from Mark. "You have no idea what you've done. You'll regret this." I smiled and blocked his number as well. They were wrong. I knew exactly what I had done, and I didn't regret a single second of it. The thing about being treated like nothing for most of your life is that eventually, you have nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you become very, very dangerous. They had taken everything from me, my dignity, my self-worth, my sense of safety. They had tried to make me believe I was worthless, that I should be grateful for abuse, that I deserved to be locked in a trunk like an animal. But they forgot something important. They forgot that even cornered animals fight back, especially when they have nothing left to lose. I spent the 3-hour bus ride to Phoenix thinking about my next steps. I couldn't go back to the house I had lived in for the past 12 years. That was never really my home anyway. I needed a job. A real one, not the part-time grocery store position where Karen took most of my paycheck. I needed a place to live. I needed to figure out how to enroll in school without Mark and Karen's financial information, since I was technically still their dependent. It would be hard. Probably the hardest thing I had ever done. But it couldn't be harder than spending another day in that trunk. In Phoenix, I used some of my remaining cash to rent a room at a women's shelter. The woman at the front desk was kind. She didn't ask too many questions, just offered me a bed, a locker for my belongings, and information about resources in the area. Over the next few weeks, I pieced together a new life. I applied for emergency financial aid at the local community college, explaining my situation to a counselor who listened without judgment. I found a full-time job at a coffee shop that offered decent tips and health insurance. I opened my own bank account, one that Karen couldn't access. I also did something I had never done before. I talked to a therapist. The shelter offered free counseling services, and I finally sat down with someone and said all the things I had been holding inside for years. They made me feel like I was nothing. I told the therapist, a woman named Dr. Martinez, who had kind eyes and never interrupted me. Like I didn't deserve to exist unless I was useful to them. "But you know that's not true now," she said gently. "Don't you?" I nodded. "I'm starting to." It wasn't easy. Some days I still heard Karen's voice in my head, telling me I was ungrateful, that I should be ashamed. Some days I missed the version of myself that still hoped they might love me, because at least that version had hope. But most days, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt free. 3 months after I left, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Leah?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Detective Sarah Chen. I'm with the Coconino County Sheriff's Department in Arizona. I'm calling about the incident that occurred at the Dusty Cactus Motor Lodge in July. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart started pounding. "Yes, I can talk. We've been investigating the report of child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment. We've reviewed the evidence, including photographs from the scene and statements from multiple witnesses. We'd like to ask you some questions about what happened during that trip." I told her everything, every detail. I didn't embellish, didn't exaggerate. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Leah," Detective Chen said finally, "I want you to know that what happened to you was not okay. It was abuse, and we're going to make sure there are consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked. "Your stepfather is being charged with child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment. Those are serious charges. He's also under investigation by his company for embezzlement. It looks like this wasn't the first time he used company funds for personal expenses. Your mother may face charges as well for failing to protect a minor in her care. We're building a case, and we may need you to testify." "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "I'll do whatever you need." "There's one more thing," she said. "We found your biological father's life insurance policy. It was left to you, but your mother never told you about it. She's been collecting the monthly payouts for 14 years, telling the insurance company she was using it for your care. There's a significant amount that should have gone to you. We're working with a lawyer to help you recover those funds." I sat down on the edge of my bed, my legs suddenly weak. "How much?" "Over $200,000, with interest." I couldn't speak. My mother had stolen from me. Not just my dignity, not just my childhood, but actual money that had been meant for my future. "Leah?" Detective Chen's voice was concerned. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," I managed to say. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just know that we're on your side. You're not alone anymore." That's when I started crying. Not sad tears, but something else. Relief, maybe, or anger. Or grief for the child I had been, the one who had tried so hard to be loved by people who were incapable of loving her. The legal process took over a year. Mark was convicted of child endangerment and received a suspended sentence along with probation and mandatory counseling. The embezzlement charges were more serious. His company pressed charges, and he ended up with a felony conviction that cost him his job and his reputation. Karen avoided jail time but was placed on probation. More importantly, she was forced to return every cent she had taken from my father's life insurance policy, plus penalties and interest. Tiffany? She dropped out of Arizona State after one semester. Without Mark's income, and with both parents facing legal troubles, there was no money for her expensive lifestyle anymore. Last I heard, she was working retail and living with a roommate in Scottsdale. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. The money from my father's life insurance policy changed everything. I paid off the small debts I had accumulated. I bought a reliable used car. I moved into a small apartment of my own, and I enrolled in a 4-year university to study psychology. I wanted to understand why people hurt each other, why families can be so cruel, and how people heal from trauma. I wanted to help other people who had been where I was. On the first day of classes, I sat in a lecture hall surrounded by other students, my laptop open, my coffee still hot in my hand. The professor was talking about resilience, about the human capacity to survive and thrive even after terrible circumstances. Trauma doesn't define us, she said. How we respond to trauma, how we grow beyond it, that's what defines us. I thought about that trunk in the Arizona desert, the heat, the hunger, the moment I realized I was nothing to them. And then I thought about the bus ride away, the sunrise over the desert, the first breakfast I bought with my own money, the therapist who taught me that I had value even when no one else saw it, the detective who believed me, the coffee shop manager who gave me a chance, the university that accepted me. I thought about all the moments, big and small, where I had chosen to keep going, where I had chosen myself. That's what defined me. Not the trunk, not the abuse, not the years of being told I was worthless, but the moment I decided I was done being their victim, the moment I took my life back. After class, I walked across campus. It was a beautiful day, sunny but not too hot. Students were sprawled on the grass, studying or laughing with friends. The air smelled like possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate, asking if I wanted to grab dinner later. I had a roommate now, and a friend. Someone who knew my story and didn't judge me for it. Someone who thought I was brave. I was starting to believe that might be true. That night, I went back to my apartment and did something I had been putting off for months. I pulled out the few items I still had from my old life. There wasn't much. A few photos from childhood, a stuffed animal my real father had given me, a birthday card from a friend I had lost touch with years ago. And one more thing. The shirt I had worn that day in the desert, the one Tiffany had dumped soda on. I had kept it as evidence, but I didn't need it anymore. The police had their photos. The case was closed. I took the shirt outside to the apartment complex's dumpster. I stood there for a moment, holding it, remembering the girl who had worn it. The girl who had been so desperate to be loved that she accepted crumbs and called it kindness. Then I threw it away. I went back inside, locked my door, and sat down at my desk. I had an essay to write for my psychology class. The assignment was to discuss a moment of personal transformation, a time when we had to choose between staying in a familiar but harmful situation or taking a leap into the unknown. I smiled and started typing. This is the story of how I spent 5 days locked in a trunk in the Arizona desert, I wrote, and how I learned that sometimes the only way out is to burn everything down and build something new from the ashes. I wrote for hours that night, pouring everything onto the page. Every moment of pain, every second of rage, every instant of clarity when I realized I deserved better. When I finally finished, it was past midnight. My eyes were tired, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Tomorrow I would edit it, refine it, make it into something I could turn in for a grade. But tonight, it was just mine, my story, my truth. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. Not the punishing, relentless sun of the Arizona desert, but gentle California sunshine filtered through the curtains I had picked out myself. I stretched, luxuriating in the simple pleasure of having space to move, air to breathe, freedom to exist. My phone showed several messages from my study group, asking about the reading assignment. I had a study group now, people who texted me, who valued my input, who saw me as an equal. It still felt surreal sometimes. I got ready for class, taking my time in the shower, using the shampoo I had bought for myself at the store. Not the cheap bar soap Mark used to throw at me, but actual shampoo that smelled like lavender and made my hair soft. Such a small thing, but it mattered. As I walked to campus, I thought about the question my therapist had asked me last week. Do you ever regret what you did? The revenge? The way you exposed them? I had thought about it carefully before answering. No, I had said finally, I don't regret it. They would still be doing the same things if I hadn't stopped them. Maybe not to me anymore, but to someone else. Mark would still be stealing from his company. Karen would still be manipulating whoever was convenient. Tiffany would still be cruel because cruelty had always worked for her. I didn't destroy their lives. I just held up a mirror and made sure the right people saw what was really there. Dr. Martinez had nodded. That's a healthy way to look at it. You held them accountable. That's not revenge, Leah. That's justice. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was justice. Or maybe it was both. Maybe I was allowed to feel satisfied that they had faced consequences. Maybe I was allowed to sleep peacefully at night knowing that Mark lost his job, that Karen had to return the money she stole from me, that Tiffany's golden child status had tarnished beyond repair. Maybe I was allowed to be human, complicated, neither perfect victim nor ruthless villain, but something in between. Someone who had been hurt and who had fought back. Someone who had survived. 3 years later, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology. I stood on that stage in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family. My roommate was there, cheering louder than anyone. My professor, the one who had taught that first class about resilience, was there, having mentored me through countless research projects. The manager from the coffee shop where I had worked all through college was there, having given me time off to study for finals and celebrating my success like it was her own. Karen and Mark were not there. Tiffany was not there, and I was glad. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to see my success and feel regret. I didn't need closure from them because I had found closure within myself. After the ceremony, we all went out to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. I picked up the tab, using money from my new job. I had been hired by a nonprofit organization that worked with young people in abusive family situations, helping them navigate the legal system and find resources to escape. To Leah, my friend Sarah said, raising her glass, who is going to change so many lives? To Leah, everyone echoed. I raised my own glass, feeling emotion tighten my throat. To second chances, I said, and to never accepting less than we deserve. We clinked glasses, and I took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. This was my life now. These were my people. This was the future I had built with my own hands, out of the wreckage of that trunk in the desert. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I received an email notification. It was from a victim advocacy organization I had reached out to months ago. They were interested in having me speak at their annual conference about my experience, about how I had escaped an abusive family situation and built a new life. I read the email twice, then looked around my small apartment, at the books on my shelves, the art I had chosen for my walls, the plants I was somehow managing to keep alive, at the evidence of a life that was wholly, completely mine. I typed my response. Yes, I would be honored to share my story. Because that was the final step, wasn't it? Not just surviving, not just escaping, but using what I had learned to help others find their way out too. The conference was 6 months later, held in a hotel ballroom filled with hundreds of people. I stood backstage, my hands shaking slightly, my notes clutched in front of me. The moderator was introducing me, talking about my work, my education, my advocacy. Please welcome Leah Morrison, she said, and the audience applauded. I walked onto that stage, stood behind the podium, and looked out at all those faces. Some young, some old, some scarred by visible wounds, others carrying invisible ones. All of them there because they understood that families could hurt you, that homes could be prisons, that the people who were supposed to love you could be the ones who damaged you most. I took a deep breath and began. My name is Leah, and when I was 19 years old, my family locked me in the trunk of a car in the Arizona desert for 5 days. The room was silent. Everyone was listening. I told them everything. The heat, the hunger, the humiliation, the moment I realized I had to save myself because no one else was coming, the plan I made, the justice I sought, the life I built, and then I told them the most important part. I want you to know something, I said, my voice steady. If you're in a situation like I was, if you feel trapped, if you think there's no way out, I need you to hear this. You are worth saving. You are worth fighting for. And you are stronger than you know. When I finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. People stood, some were crying. A woman in the front row mouthed, "Thank you" to me, tears streaming down her face. Afterward, dozens of people came up to talk to me. They shared their stories, their struggles, their fears. I listened to each one, offered what help I could, connected them with resources. One young woman, probably 18 or 19, stood at the edge of the crowd, waiting until everyone else had gone. When it was finally her turn, she looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "My family treats me like you described," she said quietly. "I don't know how to get out." I took her hand. "Let me help you, that's what I'm here for." We sat down together, and I began walking her through her options. Resources, legal aid, shelters, education assistance. All the things I had had to figure out on my own, I could now hand to her like a roadmap. This was why I had survived, not just to escape, but to help others escape too. To be the person I had needed when I was locked in that trunk, drowning in heat and hopelessness. Years passed. I became a licensed therapist, specializing in family trauma. I wrote articles, gave talks, trained other professionals on how to recognize and respond to abuse. I helped dozens, then hundreds of people find their way out of toxic family situations and into lives they had built for themselves. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I fell in love. His name was David, and he was a teacher at an alternative high school for at-risk youth. We met at a fundraiser for the nonprofit I worked for. He had kind eyes and a gentle laugh, and when I told him my story, stripped of all artifice and defense mechanisms, he didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with admiration. "You're remarkable," he said simply. "I'm a survivor," I corrected. "That's all." "That's everything," he replied. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. We got married in a small ceremony in a garden, surrounded by the family we had chosen rather than the families we had been born into. My friend Sarah was my maid of honor, Dr. Martinez came, bringing a gift wrapped in silver paper that made me cry when I opened it, a framed quote that read, "She remembered who she was, and the game changed." There was no one there from my old life. I had sent invitations to Karen and Mark, not because I wanted them there, but because I wanted to prove to myself that their absence didn't hurt me anymore. They didn't respond. They didn't come, and I danced at my wedding with joy, surrounded by people who loved me, without a single moment of regret. On my wedding night, David and I drove to a hotel in the mountains. As we wound up the dark roads, David reached over and took my hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I thought about the girl in the trunk, convinced she was worthless. I thought about the young woman on the bus to Phoenix, terrified but determined. I thought about the college student writing her first essay about trauma. I thought about the therapist helping her first client escape an abusive home. I thought about the woman I had become, the life I had built, the love I had found. "Yes," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "I'm happy." 5 years after my wedding, I received a letter. It was forwarded through my therapist's office. As all correspondence from my old family had to be per the restraining order I had obtained after they tried to contact me repeatedly, asking for money once they learned about my father's insurance policy. The letter was from Tiffany. I almost threw it away unopened. But something made me curious. I had heard through distant connections that Tiffany had been through her own struggles. Divorce. Financial problems. A custody battle. Life had not been kind to her. I opened the letter. It was short, handwritten on lined paper that looked like it had been torn from a notebook. "Leah," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you. I know what we did to you is unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. About them. About me. I've spent the last few years in therapy, trying to understand why I was so cruel to you, why I thought it was okay to treat another person that way. I don't have a good answer, except that I was taught that some people matter and some people don't, and I never questioned it until my own daughter was born and I realized that I never want her to grow up thinking it's okay to hurt people who can't fight back. I'm sorry. It's not enough, but it's true. I'm sorry for every moment of pain I caused you. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope you've built a good life. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be happy. Tiffany." I read the letter 3 times, then put it down on my desk and stared at it. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel much of anything except a kind of distant sadness for all of us, for all the years wasted on cruelty and dysfunction. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. Tiffany's apology was her burden to carry, her amends to make with herself. I had stopped needing anything from her a long time ago, but I kept the letter. Not as a trophy or a reminder of my victimhood, but as evidence that people could change. Sometimes. Maybe not enough. Maybe not in time. But they could change. And if they could change, then there was hope for all the other families out there. All the other Leahs locked in trunks. Metaphorical or literal, waiting for their moment to escape. That became my mission. To help them escape. To be the voice that said, "You matter. You deserve better. You can survive this." Because I had survived. Against all odds, against all expectations, I had not just survived, but thrived. 10 years after that day in the desert, I returned to Arizona. Not to Paige, not to that motel, but to the Grand Canyon. David and I made the trip together, part of a larger vacation through the Southwest. We stood at the rim of the canyon, looking out at the vast expanse of rock and sky. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red and purple. "It's beautiful," David said, his arm around my waist. "It is," I agreed. And it was. The desert that had once been a prison was now just a place, magnificent and indifferent. The heat that had nearly killed me was just weather. The state that had held my worst memories was also home to this incredible natural wonder. I had taken back my story. I had taken back my power. And now I could stand here and appreciate the beauty without being haunted by the pain. "Do you want to talk about it?" David asked gently. He knew where we were, what this place meant to me. "No," I said, leaning into him. "I'm good." And I was. That night, in our hotel room, I lay awake thinking about everything that had brought me to this moment. All the choices, good and bad. All the pain and all the healing. All the moments where I could have given up but didn't. I thought about the girl in the trunk, and I wanted to tell her, you make it, you get out. You build a life so beautiful that some days you can hardly believe it's yours. The people who hurt you face consequences. The money that was stolen from you is returned. You find love, find purpose, find yourself. You make it. I reached for my phone and opened my notes app. I had been thinking about writing a book. My therapist and several publishers had encouraged me to do it. Maybe it was time. I started typing. Chapter 1. The trunk. The heat was the first thing I noticed. Not the darkness, not the cramped space, not the smell of gasoline and old rubber. The heat. I wrote through the night, barely aware of time passing. David woke up around 2 in the morning and found me still typing. Can't sleep? He asked, his voice drowsy. I'm writing, I said. I think I'm finally ready to write the whole story. He kissed the top of my head. Good, the world needs to hear it. It took me 18 months to finish the book. 18 months of dredging up memories I had worked hard to process, of reliving the pain so I could put it into words. But it was worth it. The book was published 2 years later under the title The Trunk, a memoir of family abuse, survival and the courage to fight back. It became a bestseller almost immediately. Not because people loved reading about suffering, but because so many people saw themselves in my story. The reviews were full of comments like, this was my childhood, and I thought I was the only one, and this book gave me the courage to leave. I did a book tour, traveling to 20 cities, speaking to packed auditoriums. At every event, people lined up for hours to tell me their stories, to thank me, to ask for advice. And at every event, I said the same thing. You are not alone. You are not crazy. What happened to you was real, and it was wrong, and you have the right to protect yourself. One woman at a signing in Seattle told me that my book had inspired her to finally leave her abusive parents and get her own apartment at age 26. She was crying as she told me, but they were tears of relief. I didn't think I could do it, she said. But if you could survive what you went through, I can survive this. You can, I told her, gripping her hands. You absolutely can. That was the real victory. Not the bestseller status or the speaking fees or the movie deal that was in negotiation. The real victory was in the hundreds of people who read my story and found the courage to write their own. 20 years after that day in the trunk, I received a phone call from Detective Sarah Chen. I hadn't spoken to her in years, though we occasionally exchanged emails around the holidays. Leah, she said, her voice warm with familiarity, I thought you should know. Mark passed away. I sat down on my couch, processing the information. How? Heart attack. He was 68. I wanted you to hear it from me rather than stumble across it somewhere. Thank you, I said. How do I feel about this? She laughed softly. That's something only you can answer. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, trying to identify what I was feeling. Relief? Sadness? Vindication? Maybe all of those things. Maybe none of them. Mostly, I realized I felt nothing. Mark had stopped being a significant figure in my life so long ago that his death barely registered as a blip in my consciousness. He was just a man who had hurt me once, consequences had followed, and now he was gone. I didn't attend the funeral. I sent no flowers, no card. I simply acknowledged the information and moved on with my day. Karen sent me an email through my website a few months later. She was asking for money, claiming she couldn't afford the mortgage now that Mark was gone. I deleted the email without responding and blocked her address. Some people never change. Some people remain victims of their own choices until the very end. But I had changed. I had chosen differently, and that made all the difference. Now, at 40 years old, I run a foundation that helps young people escape abusive family situations. We provide legal assistance, temporary housing, educational scholarships, and therapeutic support. Every person we help is another version of me, another soul who deserves a chance to build a life free from cruelty. My daughter, Emma, is 7 years old now. She's smart, funny, and kind. She has never spent a single moment feeling like she has to earn her right to exist. David and I have raised her in a home filled with love, respect, and healthy boundaries. Sometimes she asks me about my parents, having heard bits and pieces over the years. Why don't I have grandparents on your side? She asked recently. I thought carefully about my answer. I don't lie to her, but I also don't burden her with details she's too young to process. Sometimes, I told her, people make choices that hurt others. My parents made choices that hurt me. So I decided to build my own family instead, with people who know how to love well. She nodded, processing this. Like Grandma Martinez? She asked, referring to my former therapist who had become like a mother to me. Exactly like Grandma Martinez, I said, pulling her close. That evening, after Emma was asleep, David and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. It was late summer, and the air was finally cooling after a hot day. Do you ever think about it? David asked. The trunk, that trip, all of it? Sometimes, I admitted. Less than I used to. It used to define me, you know? I was the girl who survived the trunk, but now I'm just Leah. Wife, mother, therapist, advocate. The trunk is part of my story, but it's not the whole story anymore. What would you say to her? David asked. To 19-year-old Leah, if you could go back? I considered the question. I'd tell her that she's braver than she knows, that the pain won't last forever, that she'll build something beautiful from the ashes, that she'll find love, find purpose, find peace. I paused, then added, and I'd tell her to keep that $260 hidden better. She almost got caught. David laughed, and I joined in, the sound of our laughter mingling with the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. This was my life now, not perfect, but mine. Built on my own terms, filled with people who loved me authentically, dedicated to making sure others could find their way to freedom like I did. The trunk in the Arizona desert was 20 years behind me, but the lessons I learned there, the strength I discovered, the determination that saved my life, those were still with me. They would always be with me. And I would use them to light the way for everyone still trapped in their own trunks, metaphorical or literal, waiting for their moment to push open the lid and climb out into the light. Because that's what survivors do. We survive, we heal, and then we reach back and help others do the same. That's my story, that's my truth, that's my victory. And if you're reading this, if you're trapped in your own trunk, I want you to know, you can make it out. You are strong enough, you deserve better. And on the other side of that trunk lid, there's a whole life waiting for you to claim it. A life that's yours, a life worth living, a life worth fighting for. So fight, survive, escape, and when you make it to the other side, reach back and help the next person find their way out. That's how we change the world. One escape at a time, one survivor at a time, one story at a time. This is mine. What will yours be?